finish asking the question, and then so that the next one can step up and have the opportunity to ask his or her question.
Actually, I can say real quick now, so let's see Councilmember Karen Holman for Palo Alto.
All right, wow.
Okay.
A lot of your colleagues who support you. That's great.
All right. So, please just line up.
Okay. My name's Terry Holmes.
You might need to turn on the microphone. No,
oh yeah, you're right.
No.
Okay. My name's Terry Holzmer. I am from Palo Alto. I'm very concerned about SB 35 and its impacts on the local community. I know you've all voiced your different opinions on it, but I'd like to know why the state, for example, did not, instead of mandating just housing per se, why didn't they mandate below market rate housing? I think one of the most important things in this area is below market rate housing. Why not mandate the fact that any new housing project over a certain number of square feet must have at least 50% below market rate housing? And I'd like to know your answers to that.
You can use that microphone. We can pass the microphone around. Yeah, Mr. Kansen.
I'd like to try with this one.
This one. No, this is not.
No, what's working? I'll figure that one out. But anyway, there are discussions about the we call it inclusionary housing. Before, when we have the redevelopment agency, there's a law to mandate that if you build in the RDA area, 20% of them will have to be inclusionary or below the rate market. But then there was a lawsuit. There were two lawsuits. One was suing against the apartment for rent type of housing. The other one it was suing for the owner-occupied housing. So I know one of the was against San Jose, that was being settled, right? The lawsuit was recently settled.
There's a couple of lawsuits.
There are a couple of lawsuits. So we do have some real ideas. They're trying to address this issue, but then also there's also a lot of opposition because the opposition feel that, well, you have 20% below market rate housing, and you're making the 80% of the buyers to pay higher to compensate for that. So there's always an argument, but we are definitely looking into how to bring back the inclusionary housing.
Please announce your name and if you're representing some agency or organization, or if you're in an elected official, then please also tell us your title.
I'm Jeff Paulson. I'm Vice Chair of the Cupertino Planning Commission. And Assembly Chu, I really took to heart your comment about your grandchildren's pictures. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, and his stories took me back to the horse and buggy days of transportation. So my question for all of you, and I've been asking a number of people this and getting a number of answers as to why it can't happen, but is there any chance that we could combine the 27 different transit agencies in the Bay Area?
This is really a turf fight. If I can rephrase that question, is it really being able to consolidate all 16 cities in Santa Clara into a fewer city? There's the LAFCO. LAFCO is looking at those problems, but my gut feel answer is no. There's a lot of turf fight. In San Jose, Chappie mentioned about 29 school districts. We have 2 school districts, have only 1 school. So just to be able to consolidate them is very, very challenging. And we're talking about regional planning. Well, I mentioned about the VTA does not talk to the same trend. The VTA does not talk to the San Mateo County as well, the Alameda County AV Transit. But even on the BTA board, is a very, what's the best word? You know, they divided the Santa Clara County into regions. You know, there's the north regions, you know, there's north cities, and there's Palo Alto, I don't know, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, 3-4 cities. So amongst those 3-4 cities, they only pick 1 or 2 representatives from the 4 city councils, so to be a representative on the BTA board. And then you have the west cities, Cupertino, Campbell, and they're fighting, you know, 3-4 cities to have 1 representative on the BTA board. Okay, and then you go to the south. There's only 2 cities in the south, Morgan Hill and Gilroy. So the north cities say, well, that's not fair. You guys, you know, Morgan Hill, you have a representative on BTA every other year, you know, because there's only 2 cities, you're rotating back and forth. And the north city, we have 4 cities, so my city will not be able to get 1 representative every 4 years. So then there's an argument. So what they do, back then, they say, okay, why don't we loop Milpitas into the part of south cities? And Milpitas happen to be the northeast, the cities and the county. So there's a long answer to a question that I would say no, but I leave it to the consultant.
I would agree politically that's not going to happen, but there's another side to this, and you're all sitting in this room for a reason. You have an interest in this, and a lot of you are politically elected officials. A lot of you have influence in your own communities. There's the political domain, and then there's the community domain. And very much so, if you start showing up at these meetings, the influence that happens on those meetings multiplies. And I think there is the possibility of, if we're going to talk about regional planning, we can't talk about it in isolation. We can't forget that these communities exist among themselves. And if we have 27 representatives or 27 agencies on transportation and 45 agencies on education and 16 agencies on water and 32 agencies on air traffic, we can't do that. So we have to come in as businesses, as residents, and say, I want this to happen sooner than later. And here's our suggestions on how to move forward with that. And I think that drives things a lot more quickly. And Tom mentioned something earlier that I want to bring up. Very often these decisions get left for year after year after year after year. Should we put the light rail down Highway 85? Should we have a corridor for transportation on Lawrence Expressway? But then industry comes in and we start adopting new technologies like cars that drive themselves or on-demand cars. So in fact, the technology itself is driving the initiative to change the policy, which never got changed by the 27 agencies that have it.
Wow. Oh, she's so light.
All right.
Enlightening.
Okay, next question, please.
My name is Greg Schaefer. I'm a concerned citizen. The list is too long to tell you about it. I would like to know why developers are not required to submit a business plan for their projects. For example, Valco, that project never had a business plan.
Thank you.
So there is some financial requirements for developers to come in. And the gentleman before asked whether or not we should have 50% BMR housing. One thing we have to remember about development is it's private industry. It is not really the government coming in and building that. It's private industry, private individuals, private corporations that are building it. It has to be financially sound, or they don't make money and the development doesn't get built, or it doesn't get built to the specifications that they tell the city or the county. So there needs to be a balance. Yes, there needs to be a business plan, as it were, but there has to be financial viability to do what they say. And in many respects that does exist. Unfortunately, the accountability is not always there.
And there's another way to think of it. You know, not only do we need affordable housing, we need affordable commercial spaces and retail spaces. So in Palo Alto, we passed a retail protection ordinance that existing ground floor retail needed to remain retail. And so it's kind of the opposite. If you want to argue that your location's not good for retail, then you need to provide 10 years worth of business statements and we need to really show more of a business plan about why retail is not feasible. And so I think you can require, cities can require, different kinds of financial statements. And one way to look at it is if you want an exception or you want to not do something, then you need to provide that information.
Please.
My name is Phyllis Dickstein. I'm a concerned Cupertino resident, and I want to address the elephant in the room, which everyone's been skirting around, which is office. We have a housing crisis. We have a transportation crisis. We have an air pollution crisis. And we are a semi-arid area that whatever technology you talk about, if right now we're being told to watch how we flush, we're going to have a water shortage crisis as well. Yet how is it that on a regional planning level is it at all possible to address the issue of over-office development? Because that's the root problem of our crisis.
Thank you.
I don't think I've skirted that. I've talked about that again, spreading office throughout the Bay Area, really thinking about incentives. And again, in Palo Alto, we have the issue that office is so lucrative, it pushes out other uses, and developers look for ways to convert properties that are not necessarily office to office. And so, I agree with you, it's a problem. It's definitely a first world problem. For Palo Alto, we'd have 3 times the number of jobs to housing. And I think we really have to work on both demand and supply in that equation.
So one of the things you can do about that is to pay attention to your city's general plan. And one of the issues that I have, and I live in Cupertino, so I have an issue with this directly here, is that the general plan is seen as some sort of general blueprint, but not observed. And then there's amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment to a plan that's supposed to be the blueprint. So from the state level down, general plans have to be firmly entrenched in the reasoning for why they exist. And that is to manage what is the ratio of offices that should be in the city, what type of infrastructure needs to be in place, how much retail should be there, where your gateways are. All of those things are critical both to the local aspect and the regional aspect. So if you want to manage some of that, go to your city council and say, let's look at my general plan and make sure you enforce it.
I'll just be really brief. San Jose, we don't have that issue. Our jobs to employed residents ratio is 0.85. I believe Palo Alto is 3 to 1, and their tax revenue per resident is 3 or 4 times what it is for San Jose. So I agree that jobs and employment are going to the wrong location. We need to get jobs closer to where people live.
Please.
My name is Kathy Helderson. I've lived here for 37 years. And I'm really upset because no one brought up the environmental issue with the pollution here in the valley, not just in Cupertino. I have been an advocate against Lehigh Southwest Cement and Quarry and the Stevens Creek Quarry that is polluting the whole valley and the San Francisco Bay and the reservoir and the creeks. I need to know what's going on here. I get nowhere with the congressman. I get nowhere. Obviously, you're not covering any environmental issues. Okay. So you're all leaving this out, but this is the prime cause is this, all these cars, all these people moving in, all these businesses. You really think that you're not going to address the environmental issues? How could you avoid it? Now they're going to put in a new quarry. They're going to mine a new quarry for another 100 years. And no one cares, and no one does anything about it. And I've been to Better Cupertino many times asking about this, and they are too busy, excuse me, to get involved. This is the prime objective here, to get involved in doing something about this. The question is this: why is it that none of you decided to include the environment and the pollution to the air, water, and the soil here? Okay, it is affecting our aquifer and our water. That's one thing, okay? The bond issue, wait a minute. the bond issue. What happens to our tax money? Where does our tax money go when you're always introducing the bond? Excuse me, no one's talked about that.
Okay,
The
please sit
third
down when
issue
you,
is, out of 6 houses in my neighborhood, my little cul-de-sac, 4 of them are rooming houses. That's what's happening to our communities. These expensive homes with 3 bathrooms and 5 or 10 bedrooms are turning into rooming houses because they can't pay their mortgage. The taxes are too high. You people are doing nothing about that.
please sit down.
Well, I'd like to sit down, but I haven't heard an answer yet. So when I hear answers, I will sit down.
No, you take the answers while you sit down. Because
Why do I
then,
have to do that?
because otherwise you will raise a follow-up questions and then it becomes a discussion. And we want to get the line going.
Open forum. This is not an open forum.
Okay.
So I'll try to tackle your question, or at least part of it. We spoke earlier about the impact on the environment, having employees driving an hour or 2 hours to work each way, and the impact on the environment of having those long commutes. And that's why we have a strategy of trying to get employees closer to where they work, so they don't have to drive as far, or they can take public transportation or other modes of transportation to get to their jobs. I think, Kathy, you brought up an excellent point in terms of, people are renting out their rooms.
Yeah.
Multiple families are now living in one unit. People are homeless. I mean, if we do nothing, I know some members of the community say we don't want any more growth in terms of business, we don't want any more growth in terms of housing. If we just said tonight, or today, on this panel, we said there's going to be a moratorium on anything, the problem is going to continue to get worse. You're going to have people renting out their rooms. You're going to have multiple families in units. You're going to have people driving, long distances to get to work, and the impact on the environment. If we do nothing, things are going to get worse. So I think the real debate is in terms of what is the right strategy in terms of addressing the issues.
Just real quick, I think you bring up some really good issues. I think, again, it can't just be about economic growth. It has to be about environmental concerns, quality of life issues. And I know in Palo Alto, I'm not familiar with what other cities are doing right now, but even looking at Airbnb and converting existing housing stock into short-term rentals, it's really removing a lot of housing, and it's a big concern.
One quick note, I mentioned it earlier, I did mention the environment, and that is California CEQA. So SB 35, one of the things it does is it bypasses to some degree the environmental impact reports that are required. And there needs to be a balance. I know we want things to be inexpensive, we want them to be clean, we want them to be available. Unfortunately, it takes time. And one of the things that we need to pay attention to is that when you're going to authorize a development, you need to make sure that that fits with the environment. We all have to breathe the air, we all have to drink the water, we all have to live in the same environment. Just as I mentioned earlier about the smoke, it doesn't stop at political boundaries. And so we're stuck with that. I think we need to sort of balance those two things. We certainly need housing, we need affordable housing, we need jobs, and we can't do so much so that we affect the environment in an entirely way.
Next question.
My name is Jan Stokely. I'm Executive Director of Housing Choices. We're a nonprofit, and we've been working with families here in Cupertino and Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, Mountain View to try to create housing for adults with developmental disabilities. And it's been really a challenge, so that brings me to my question. We have a housing element law where each jurisdiction is allocated their fair share of the regional housing need across multiple income levels. And then local government gets that allocation, and it's up to them to figure out how to create the housing, which seems like a perfect distribution of power and role. But the problem is there are jurisdictions that don't create their fair share. They have a housing element that plans for it, but then 8 years go by and it doesn't happen. So in the best of all possible worlds, what would you say should be the consequences for a jurisdiction that doesn't produce the housing that's called for under the regional housing needs allocation at all income levels.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is John.
Not yet.
Was that a question? Answer? Question? Go ahead. Okay. Yes, we are fully aware of this problem. So when we go back to Sacramento, we'll be discussing of how we allocate the housing bond money. You know, we were talking about a carrot and a stick approach. The SB 35 you might consider as a stick, but the housing bond money we're trying to as a carrot to incentivize the local jurisdiction to really be able to fill their arena number. So yeah, we're looking at it. Like I say, if the local jurisdiction all do their jobs, then I'll be out of the job.
Right, let's hope that happens. Not at all. Somebody mentioned something about bonds and taxes, and I just wanted to make sure it's very clear that those are two different things. The bonds are issued by the state or by a region, and you buy them, and that money is then reverted back over a period of time. It's just like any bond. It's not a tax measure. It's not added onto the property. It's a bond. It's a loan. That's correct.
You sold it in the open market.
Right, it's sold on the open market.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Eugene Bradley. I'm the founder of the Silicon Valley Transit View, a public transit advocacy and watchdog group. One of the things that I've noticed just coming here to Cupertino all the way down to Monterey County, one of the things I see a lot of around here is what's creating some of the very air pollution that people talk about as well as traffic, and that is copious amounts of free parking. Especially in San Jose, when the city council there proposed that Google wants to have basically a $2 million underground parking garage next to Durham Station. I was wondering if any city council, whether it's Chappie Jones within San Jose or even here, has considered how much of this street parking is actually sucked away at VTA's bus and light rail ridership. So in essence, how would Chappie Jones, city council member, consolidate with Chappie Jones on VTA's board of directors on basically how much all the free parking is sapped away VTA's bus and light rail ridership, and helping to create some of the very empty buses many of our residents tend to complain about here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I have some good news for those people that not so opposing to the bound measure, that there will be, come next June, will be another $4 billion bound to address the water issues in California. But most of the money will go down to the Southern California because as we're speaking right now, Imperial County, there are residents that, they turn on their faucet, there'll be no water coming out. So there's a huge need in Imperial County, and the Salton Sea smells so bad, and even people that live across the border start complaining about the odor from the Salton Sea. So, but I do have some a significant amount of money to strengthen our levee in the Delta. So there will be another a $4 billion bound, on the water bound, on top of the housing bound. And also, come next year, you might have to vote on we'll call it Regional Measure 3. I'm talking about regional planning. That's a perfect topic. I should have brought it up early. To increase the bridge toll by up to $3. And so it does not impact the southern part of the region as much as it does to the northern part of the region. So initially, when we're talking about how we're going to divvy up the funding, the proceeds, and they kind of not paying enough attention by my standard to the Santa Clara County, but I being able, as it today, to have them committed some funding to make sure that we to some gap funding for the BART to downtown San Jose, but most importantly to ask the BTA to finish their light rail down to East Ridge Mall and the Evergreen area in San Jose, and from East Ridge Mall along Santa Clara Street we have a bus rapid transit, which will hopefully go extended all the way to Stevens Creek Boulevard, and to address some of the traffic issues. So we've been busy. We've been busy.
Any other items? Next, please.
My name is Chris Sheleth. I'm a concerned resident of Cupertino. I was actually debating whether to come to this forum, and my daughter advised me that I should go, and I was really enlightened. I was sitting in the front seat here. I think a lot of the questions and the answers that I heard, it looks like there's very much support for certain themes: affordable housing, clean water, clean air, traffic congestion, and we've got to address that. And there were some great ideas. So as I was sitting through listening to you guys talk about it, it seemed like it's not a planning and strategy problem. It's maybe a design, collaboration, and execution problem. Maybe it's a budget issue, or whatever that is. How can we fight that gridlock and make sure that we make progress? It seems to, we all want to do the right thing, we all have our heart in the right place, but we seem to be struggling with execution. As an example, Kansen, you eloquently talked about the affordable housing thing that the state is doing. We have an ABAG recommendation for affordable housing. Cupertino has dismal numbers. Our low income and very low income households are nowhere where it should be. How do we tackle these issues and make progress? I don't think anybody in this room disagrees with certain, standard tenets of what we need to do as a good city. We seem to be struggling with it.
Thank you.
So one of the things, and I agree with you completely, that execution. But the problem is defining what that execution should be. And low-cost housing, lower-cost housing, affordable housing, even the definition of that is a difficult thing to come to. When you live in a town like Cupertino, where the median price of a house is over $1 million, now getting closer to $2 million, what's affordable? The days of $300 rent or $400 rent are long gone, and no matter how much you supplement 50 or 60 or 100 or 200 or 500 houses, it is not going to accommodate all of the people who have need. I went to my bank not long ago, and I noticed that there's different tellers in there. And I came back the next week, and there were different tellers in there again. And I pulled the manager aside. I said, I've been with your bank 30 years. What's wrong? Why don't you have, is there something wrong with the bank? The answer wasn't that there was anything wrong with the bank. The answer was that people couldn't afford to live in this area. So if you want people to take care of your dry cleaning or your groceries or your banking or whatever, you have to have a way for them to come here and do that. And the problem is now, because it costs so much in cities like Cupertino and Sunnyvale, Los Gatos, and Palo Alto, and even San Jose, they have to come from farther and farther and farther. There's people coming from Tracy to do that. So first we have to kind of agree on what is going to be feasible in order to do that execution. And then we need you guys to make it known that we have to do it.
Just a couple of thoughts on the funding side. I mean, I am concerned about the $3 bridge toll. $6 for people commuting the furthest. It seems it could be regressive, right? And the funding issues are very difficult. To get an affordable housing project passed, you got to put together a lot of things. There's things happening at the federal level that may impact the tax credits that people get, which is how a lot of these projects are built. So it is about funding and execution, and It's that when the cost of land is so high, it's just extremely difficult.
To address some of the air pollution issues and the water pollution issues, California, we do pass legislation which we call it the cap and trade law. Have you heard about cap and trade law?
Yes, it's terrible.
Yeah. We're using, trying to get some feed from those pollutants and to help improve the air quality in California.
Next.
So kind of two questions.
Name, please.
Oh, Suzanne Keene, I'm a member of Palo Alto's for Sensible Zoning. So what is a city like Fremont and Palo Alto soon getting there, and I'm sure there's others, but with this SB 35 mandate, what are they supposed to do with not having enough schools? We don't in Palo Alto have that many places to even build new schools. And also, the whole idea of bringing all these people into one area and not considering water and the environment seems crazy to me. I guess I believe that everybody cannot live in the same place. And when are we going to say maybe enough is enough?
Thank you.
So I want to take the schools one for a moment. When I sat on Sunnyvale's planning commission, I was approached by the Sunnyvale School District at least a dozen times to sell real estate. Not enough students, declining enrollment, that was a comment that I heard more often than not. And I made it my mission when I was on the planning commission not to allow school districts to sell real estate. And the reason was exactly that. You can't build new schools, especially at $1 million an acre in cost of land. We have a couple of esteemed members, including our state moderator here, who are on school boards and trustees for school boards. I'm sure they will tell you it is extremely tough to build new, and it is extremely tough to get more space. So yes, we need to very much remember and protect schools when we're developing, because unfortunately what happens is that you build, there's a credit allowed one time for those funds, but when was the last time you saw a new school in your area?
Super quick, I jump in. We're working on our comprehensive plan, general plan right now, and it's showing, the EIR report is showing significant impacts on the schools. But the state law, I forget which state law it is, but SB 50 says that school impacts are fully mitigated by paying a relatively low impact fee. So Kansen, maybe you can fix that for us.
I'll stay out of that one. But I just want to comment on the schools, and I think that's a great point. Obviously, we don't want to put too much stress on schools and diminish the quality of education. But I'm going to date myself. I was born at the tail end of the baby boom, and so I was that generation of students or kids that overwhelmed all the schools, for all the new construction of subdivisions that were built all throughout, California. And I was part of that demographic that overwhelmed, the school system, for the houses and the developments that you're living in right now. And so I've studied history, and I was part of that history. And I've also seen how school districts ebb and flow with population. Where I grew up, again, I was part of that generation that literally overwhelmed the school district. But then fast forward a couple of decades, and they were struggling to get enough students to even go to those schools, because my parents, whose children were long gone, were still living in those houses. So, and I'm sure you've seen that as well, the ebb and flow and the changes in demographics and how that impacts, school districts. But we were able to adapt, and we'll be able to adapt in the future. We just have to be smart about it and strategic about it. And I just want to also touch on one other point in terms of, when is enough enough? If you can work with me and figure out a way to get people to stop having children, if you can figure out a way to stop having families want to bring in their family members for family unification, if you want to figure out a way to just cut off all economic growth and jobs and stagnate, then we can have a conversation about when enough is enough.
Next.
Okay, I'm Tony Guan, concerned resident from Sunnyvale, and I'm also from the group of Save My Sun's Sky. From name, you know that we are a group that are working for airplane noise issue. So for the recently increased issue that not invited by us. So today the topic is growth. So and also somebody brought up the noise, the airplane, the air pollution issue. So I think it's all related. But I'm not going to focus on those topics. Especially, I want to stress fairness. When a city wants to grow, right? So in all dimensions, then that you have some problem. And for all you guys standing there, you are working for us, solving this problem, which is great. But I'm going to respectfully ask you, when you make a decision, right, when you propose a new solution for your city, please do this, right? So ask yourself, am I shifting my problem to the other cities or not? If no, that's great. If yes, please hold on and rethink it, because even though, so to give an example.
Please come to the point. What's your question?
Yeah, my question will be, it's not a question, it's a request, right? So, for example, Plato has been working really hard.
Sir, your time's up.
So you are interrupting me, right?
Please raise your question or please sit down because your time is up.
Okay, my question is, can Plato stop trying to shift the noise to us to solve your problem or not? That's my question. All right? Thank you.
That was a question to Palo Alto. You know, this next gen traffic control has shifted traffic, I think, all over the Bay Area. Palo Alto, we never really had an airplane noise problem, and the airplanes have been shifted onto Palo Alto. I think we've been trying to work regionally, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, trying to leverage the Bay as much as possible. And I think we publicly stated that we do not want to shift noise onto other communities.
So, not to shift things outside of the purview of the state, the county, and the cities that are here, but when was the last time an airport was built in the Bay Area? The FAA has not permitted a new airport in this valley in 50 years. And so we talked about Moffett Field being used for commercial purposes. We've talked about various areas being used, and the FAA has not permitted it. We've gone from a couple million to 7.5 million people in the South Bay alone, and yet we're still using the same airports and the same routes. So is there going to be a noise problem? We compact that many flights that are now being done into the same airports over the same period of time, and the answer is yes. And unfortunately, no matter what you do, you're going to shift the noise issues unless you speak to your federal government representatives and allow them to add in new airports.
Next.
I just
Oh, sorry.
I just want to chime in. I'm on the ad hoc committee for the South Flow flight path. That for those of you in Cupertino, West San Jose, and Sunnyvale, you know that very well. So I'm on that ad hoc committee, and I'm definitely going to advocate as hard as I can in terms of coming up with solutions to address that issue.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, I'm Judy Burrington. I live in San Jose. I'm a volunteer and advocate with the Silicon Valley Transit users. I was glad to hear the discussion on regional planning with development and housing and such. And if anybody needs business places, there's plenty in South San Jose where I live with all the empty industrial parks. But one of the things is several times when people were talking, they were mentioning the issues of people driving a long ways to come and work in this area, and it might take them a couple of hours. Well, I live in South San Jose, and if I'm going someplace where I need to take 2 modes or 3 buses, light rail, combination of them, that's going to take me 2 hours too. So, you know, some of the discussion was on the issues of focusing on transit villages and such. Well, we all don't live in transit villages. Most of us live in neighborhoods. And our transit organization in Santa Clara County, VTA, has concentrated most recently on the arterial routes and has had so many cuts to coming into our neighborhoods to get the people out to go to their doctor's appointments, to get to their jobs, to work and play and do all the other things that they do, there's another void that's happening. So please, when you're talking about public transportation, remember that people come out of houses, out of neighborhoods to get to transit routes that are come every 12 minutes, like the signs say for the 522. Thank you.
So you have a comment rather than a question?
No, my question is how to address this.
We call it last mile travel is usually a challenge for people working in transit. I talked to VTA as well as the Alameda Transit Authority. They are starting a pilot program, you know, to run the smaller buses, not the big long ones, but the smaller buses on demand purpose, like your bus services, like Uber bus services. So they started in North San Jose, my area, in the industrial area, and hopefully we can expand that. So you can pretty much, you know, download an app and get a bus closer to where you live. Not necessarily pick you up on your doorstep though.
Okay, next.
My name is Govind Tatachari. I am a citizen of Cupertino. My name is Govind Tatachari. I have a little bit of context, so I just don't want to kind of pose the question in the beginning. So the context is essentially that none of this is new. You had projection about the population growth for so many years. Nothing is new about the population growth. Nothing is new about the economics of things. The only change is in terms of the way of intensity of growth in different areas, which is not predictable. Everything else is pretty much within the parameters that have been predicted for 40 years. I can bet that each of you can relate to that particular thing very well. So the question is something like this. Where do you think the wisdom of planning really resides? You need to say something is wrong with the local planning, that the state has to get involved. And the worst thing is to come up with a legislation which actually overthrows every concept of planning by coming up with a legislation which has a poison pill. Why do you have a ministerial process to throw away CEQA? I don't understand how that can be a part of a state wisdom when the local planning itself has enough wisdom to be able to understand what is CEQA and what is not CEQA. And that's the only tool they have in their hand. So this is my first question.
Actually, we try to avoid compound question to save time.
No, the thing is, it's all related. So if you look at regional planning, I want to thank Better Cupertino, because I don't think in your lifetime you would have faced a citizen-oriented regional planning issue at all. And this is the good thing that is happening now. And in my opinion, there are 2 or 3 related regional planning issues. One is that where do you think the wisdom lies in terms of whether the state or the city or the regional bodies, which are unelected bodies who are not answerable to anybody and who are basically playing power politics. MTC has absorbed a payback. So this is one concern, which is really an issue, I think, of public anger. The second issue is, it is a related issue, please.
Well, I know it's related, but for the time's sake, you feel free to communicate with the panelists offline.
No, it is a related issue, because the thing is, in the planning process,
your time is up. Please come to your question.
No, I'm coming to the question. The planning issue is that housing is not the only determinant of what condition is. The most important thing is commercial growth, and what is the planning process for commercial growth, which is not at all being talked about. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just speak to part of what you said. You said if I heard you correctly, that nothing is new, but I think quite a few things are new, and one of the biggest is we're now in the information age, and the nature of work has changed, and government can be slow to respond. So I know in my city, we have some very outdated assumptions about office densities. And so even within existing offices, you know, when I started my career, I had my own office, and then eventually there were 2 people in an office, and then there were cubicles, and now, you know, I think Stanford plans with 80 square feet per employee. And so that's a huge change. Just the density of employees in the existing buildings has gone way up.
So one other thing, and I agree with Tom about the change. There's definitely been change. I read, I think it was in Mercury not long ago, that the number of remote access jobs was actually declining. A statistic that makes no sense in the information age. Which, as a businessman, my response to that is that if you can't manage that, it's because you're a poor manager, not because the job shouldn't be that way. So one of the things you have to do is take offline from the government's responsibility to try and deal with huge population and transportation issues, and get at some of the other issues which might address some of these things more practically. And that is that if we don't have to move people 25 miles each direction to work, and they can be accountable to their managers from their own homes or from regional offices or in ways that take away from the need to have office buildings built. When I believe it was you was mentioning the building of office space everywhere. We can reduce that if we can change the mentality of a lot of employers to understand that a certain percentage of their population can actually work remotely, and that takes some of the strain off the roads.
We're going to take the last question due to the time limit, and I apologize to the people who are still in line. You feel free to communicate with the panelists afterwards.
We would allow all the people who is in line now answer.
Right.
It's okay. She said we can take
Okay, for time's sake, please come to the question without giving a lot of context, please.
My name is Peggy Griffin from Cupertino. You talk about houses near jobs or jobs near housing, but people, it's very expensive here, and people who live in a house or an apartment, oftentimes they all work. And when the kids grow up, they stay there and keep working. So not everybody can work next door. Transportation is key. What are you doing? What can be done quickly to get transportation, mass transit of some kind, up 280, across 85, down Page Mill, where all the red is on the map?
Thank you.
Well, I'll try to tackle that real quick. I know we're running out of time. I actually served on the Route 85 advisory board to come up with transportation solutions down the 85 corridor. And actually, as part of Measure B, there was approximately, I think, $380 million that are allocated to come up with transportation solutions for that corridor. I also am aware of other efforts, for instance, El Camino, where there was a proposal to do bus rapid transit, and some of the cities were resistant to that, and so that's kind of on hold. But I'd like to see the community have a dialogue in terms of, transportation solutions along the Stevens Creek corridor. Whether it's bus rapid transit, whether it's light rail, whether it's some other mode of transportation like autonomous vehicles. That's the direction I'd like to see the city of Cupertino, Santa Clara, and San Jose come together and work out solutions.
The state funding for electrifying the Caltrain, I think it's already in place, and that will increase the cart or the trains. Right now, some of the stations are not long enough to accommodate additional train. So part of the money will to modernize some of the train station. So the Caltrain electrifying project will definitely make the train go faster, quieter, cleaner, and also hopefully the longer trains to reduce the problem in the in the peninsula. And some of the toll bridge fee money, thanks to your Assembly Member Kevin Mullen, would fought to improve some of the interlocks on 101 in that district.
My name is Tara Krishnan. I'm a Cupertino resident. I've lived here my whole life. You know, a lot of people from the younger generation like me come from immigrant families who wanted to set their roots here because this is the best city in the world. And it's increasingly hard for us to call Cupertino our home or other cities in the South Bay. You know, our millennial population has actually gone 50% since 2000. So my question for you is, how can we make Cupertino or other cities in the South Bay more attractive to millennials?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for coming out, because we need more millennials to come out and speak. There's no magic wand for that one, and I wish there were. We can do the things that I believe our schools and our industries need to be talking better, so that the degrees that we're having at Stanford or at any of our colleges in this Bay Area are tied to the jobs and the type of work that's needed here. And that will attract and give opportunity to younger people to come into the area and be able to take their education and apply it to what they do in work. At the same time, we need the infrastructure to do that. So I think it's a great question. Fortunately, I don't have a slick answer for it. I just think there needs to be a tighter link between those things.
I just want to quickly add on. First of all, thank you so much for being up and speaking. Very seldom do we hear from millennials and get to hear from the next generation. Most of the dialogue is my demographic. Baby boomers, we bought our house, 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's either paid for or almost paid for. And, we want things to just be like they were when we first moved in. And if we don't hear from you and other millennials in terms of what you're going through and your experiences and how it's impacting you, then it's just going to be a conversation among us baby boomers. And I didn't want to use old people, but okay, old people.
I also want to add my appreciation for you to take time and join this forum. Like I say, I'm working hard. I'm reaching to a retirement age, but what I'm doing is trying to make sure not just my kids and my grandchildren have the same, well, at least be able to stay where they grow up. So it is in the front and center of my agenda.
So nobody said Prop 13 yet, so I want to get that in for time. But we have these aging populations, and a huge amount of wealth is tied up in people's homes. And the way Proposition 13 is working, a lot of people really can't afford. They want to pass on that money to their heirs. And the other thing we see is in Palo Alto, the tax base has really shifted from commercial property tax to residential property tax, because commercial properties are held in trust and they don't trigger evaluations the way residential property does. And so we're really seeing just an aging population of people staying in their homes.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us all. This was a really good idea, and I think you're going to have to do it another couple of times, or a few more times, because the problems are almost insurmountable. I'd like to suggest that when you have people coming like this, that you ask every one of them if he or she has some idea about something that could be improved, that he write it down or type it out on a piece of paper and hand it in at the beginning, and you can look them over, and then you can get people grouped so that what they have to say you take up, and you've already thought that out and it's not going to work, or you go, oh, well, that might be a good idea. There's one thing that you are all better at than we are, and that's if you're elected offices, or if you're the head of something, you're better at communication. So I may have this idea that these huge companies like Google have to be made to understand that they should have the housing next to the workplace. I'm never going to convince people of that, but somebody like you could. I'm going to try and say, look, Palo Alto in the beginning, some 50 years ago, was thrilled to have money-producing companies to support the wonderful schools, never thinking that the school children were going to have to live in Cupertino. And
please come to your question.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
what's your question?
So my question, like I guess like other people, is why can't we work together better with the bigger government, like the federal government, for fair things that everybody agrees should be done? The federal government should make sure that we have no homeless veterans.
Okay.
And so if we could persuade them of that, then that would take a big burden off the cities also.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First off, thank you for your comments, and I agree very much. If you have an idea, you got to transmit it to people like us, and people, not just us here at the dais, but all of your local representatives. The object is get the idea out there, follow it up, be proactive with it. And unfortunately, not very many people do. And those that do, the squeaky wheel as it were, they have a lot of influence. So I suggest you follow up with it. But thank you for your comment.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Technansky.
Hold on, Mr. Kansen Chu wants to say something.
I'm always looking for good bill ideas, so if you have any good bill ideas, feel free to contact me, kansen.chu at asm.ca.gov.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Technansky, and I'm a 30-year Cupertino resident. My question is about the office-to-housing ratio. I keep noticing more and more empty industrial parks, empty office buildings, Class A office coming up, yet it seems like we keep approving more office, and then they say, well, we're building housing, but then they build office, which kind of negates the housing. What's the point? My city personally, we have 2 million square feet of office still sitting available on the Valco property that deeply concerns me. How hard is it for cities to why can't we try to address our housing problems? Put a tighter squeeze on office for right now and let the dust settle so we don't end up with a lot of empty office down the road and not enough housing.
Thank you.
Well, I'll start out by referring to what I spoke about before. Different cities have different issues. So in San Jose, we're trying to get businesses to move in, and it's been a struggle. And we're trying to get businesses to take over existing vacant commercial property, which has been a struggle. But the city of Palo Alto has a totally different issue, where it's an abundance of riches in terms of the amount of business and commercial activity that they have. So each city has their own unique situation and needs, but I just want to go back to the overarching strategy of how do we get commercial jobs next to or near housing so that people don't have to commute long distances and have to deal with all the other issues and ramifications of that. And since this is a regional discussion, we should be San Jose should be working closely with Cupertino, should be working closely with Santa Clara, and I actually want to acknowledge Teresa O'Neill, who's in the audience. I didn't see earlier. She was one of the signatories for the letter that I mentioned in terms of working with their neighboring cities in terms of having a coherent, integrated strategy in terms of addressing these issues.
Right. It also touched a little bit about, I mentioned about Proposition 13, the revenue source for the city of San Jose used to be reliant on the property tax. Now we more and more have to rely on the sales tax and the property tax. But some of you may not know, your property tax stay local. You pretty much support your school district. The state doesn't touch your property tax nor your sales tax. Only revenue the state generates is from your income tax. I'm sorry?
In the third county, that's what it means.
Okay, so last question.
So my understanding is now we go back to the moderator and our various community groups have an opportunity to say something about their organization.
Yes, that's a very good question. I was going to wait for you to ask a question, but having said that, I was going to ask, first of all, I would like to acknowledge we have a lot of groups in the audience, and I would give each group 1 minute to just make a statement. If you still have representatives of such grassroots group present now.
Hello, I'm here from East Palo Alto and East Menlo Park, and I just want all of you to understand the incredible wealth that you represent here in knowledge, experience, and contact. And I'm from Real Community. I'm Flora Sullivan. I taught in the East Palo Alto School District, every single school. I am a member of Real Community, and what we don't have is the brain trust that's represented here. So I will be outside. We have here a forum. We'd like to have anybody interested in helping us or being a resource for us, and only Real Community staff will contact you to help us with grooming political candidates, legal and administrative issues that may come up in our efforts to change policy, political relations advice. I'm a school teacher. Well, I'm a former urban and regional planner. And a lot of help with public relations and success strategies whenever you've seen success. So if you would just fill this out that asks you to just indicate an area we could contact you, we would be just so eternally grateful. And another person has given me their minute. East Palo Alto is the tail end of the dragon. We have 40% of our children in schools without home security. Yes, Mr. Jones, people should live close to their work, but you have ground zero with Facebook and Amazon. And if you do the demographics and the salaries, you have the PhDs living there, and you have the wait staff living in the East Bay. So just keep in mind when you recommend this, that just as we have an incredibly vibrant, socially integrated community in East Palo Alto, we are having the help staff at Stanford sleeping in their cars on our streets. And we're going to do a survey. So it's complex, and we need your help. We don't have the capacity to do it on our own.
Thank you.
And in 5 years, it doesn't matter who lives there. The same ebb and flow of traffic is going to constrict our city streets so that our buses, school, and otherwise, and our citizens cannot move freely.
Hello, my name is Susan Kirsch. I'm the founder of Citizen Marin, so we're your neighbors to the north in Marin County. And just want to say thank you to the organizers and to you as participants being as a part of this. And we've been looking at the issue of regional planning since 2011. I'm really pleased to hear that you're looking to provide your own housing solutions for the growth that you have here in the southern part of the County Bay Area. Because in Marin, we're really pleased that we do have an appropriate kind of housing jobs balance. And we really don't want to take your housing needs being pushed into Marin as a part of regional housing allocation numbers, because we've been doing a pretty good job of keeping track of that ourselves. And I think I'd like to go back to that question or the comment that was made about what is the wisdom of regional planning? And I liked your comments about the smoke doesn't really follow boundary lines. The stories that I hear from Northern Marin is that most of the rescue efforts, initially at least, were neighbors going door to door to door to say, wake up, we've got a problem. And I think most of the time, we find the wisest solutions are coming in our neighborhoods where people best know what's going on in the neighborhood, and really encourage and support all of us to work locally to solve the problems, with the regional agencies being resources to us, not top-down planning.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out this far, all the way from Marin. That's impressive.
Hello, I'm here with the Housing Choices Coalition, and we have a Housing Choices Coalition Cupertino Task Force. And I'm here trying to represent the needs for people in our community who have grown up in this community and who have developmental disabilities. Their need for housing is really important. Their need for housing in an area that's close to their support systems is extremely important. It can be done. It can be done here in Cupertino. We've been successful in San Jose. We've been successful in Palo Alto, in Mountain View, and so forth. And so I'd really like to encourage you to, in your planning, be considering housing at the extremely very low rate for people with developmental disabilities. And I just want one last comment. I saw recently, after a news article, someone wrote in and commented that any extremely low or even any affordable housing would necessarily be substantial housing, would necessarily be substandard housing. That isn't necessarily the case at all. There's affordable housing being built all around here, and it is not substandard housing. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, once again, Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit Users. Our group has to thank, between myself and Judy, please stand up, Judy, is one of our group members. Anyway, I want to thank Better Cupertino for having this awesome forum. We learned quite a bit. Just one thing that really needs to be clarified from Mr. Chu. There is a program that Cupertino is part of called RIDE, R-Y-D-E. It's a system of vans that runs between Cupertino and throughout the West Valley and even portions of southern and even western San Jose for about a couple of dollars. A van will come pick you up Uber style. It's available even right now. BTA has part of the funding on this. This stemmed from originally the community bus program originally about a few years ago, and now it's de-evolved into an actual city shuttle for the neighborhoods to get people out of the neighborhoods and at least to the main routes BTA likes to forward, likes to now focus on.
Thank you.
I'd like to just take this opportunity to address transportation. My name is Jean Bedord, and I want to encourage all of you who are in the West Valley to go to the VTA Community Forum on November 13th, which is going to be held at the Quinlan Community Center. If you guys aren't there, the money will go to San Jose and not to the West Valley.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
If you hate traffic on 85, be there.
Thank you.
What about San Jose, the West Valley part of San Jose?
No, we're going to get West
Would that be okay?
Thank you.
On behalf of the hosts and sponsors, I would like to ask you to join me and give a round of applause for our wonderful